sauce.
Yes. Let's keep reading Dr. Critchlore's School for Minions. We're up to chapter 8. Critchlore Minions. They're not just for evil overlords anymore. Advertisement in Minions Today. I headed back to the castle, edging around the fountain in the middle of the circular drive. The water sparkled and the castle itself seemed to glow in the morning light. It was massive, looking much taller than its 3 stories, castellated as it was with turrets and battlements, and anchored by a tower on each side, one wide and round, the other tall and slim. I thought about how quickly things had changed for me. I'd always dreamed of being a top-notch minion, like I imagined my brother and sister werewolves were. What could be better? Minions do great things because they work together to achieve a common goal. I'd never imagined being anything else until Dr. Critchlore offered me a spot on the junior henchman training program. Suddenly it was like a whole new world opened up. It's hard to describe what I felt, but I guess it was like this. You're at the park, swinging on the swings, happy as a troll with a peanut butter sandwich. Then someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, come with me. On the other side of the hill is an amusement park." Oops. You go on roller coasters and bumper cars. You ride that giant pendulum thing that lifts you so high and fast, it makes the swings at the playground seem as thrilling as jumping off a brick. It's so exciting you can barely breathe. That's what being a junior henchman trainee felt like to me. How did Runt get into this class? That was Rufus Spaniel, the alpha werewolf of my grade. He was sitting in the back row of Professor Murphy's History of Henchmen class with 2 other werewolves, shaggy-haired Lapso and super smart Judd. "Hey, dog," Judd said to me, lifting a hand for me to slap as I walked by. I'd spotted an open seat near the front by the window. "Sup, beast?" Lapso nodded. "Hey, guys," I said. I did a quick check of the students on my way in. Besides the werewolves, there were a couple of monkey men, a hunchback, a cyclops named Dusty taking up 2 chairs, Tim the arachno-human, and some regular humans. The class was much more crowded than I'd expected. In fact, more kids kept coming in until all the desks were taken and students had to stand crammed in by the wall. At last, Professor Murphy entered the room. He was a short, round man with thick black and grey hair. His glasses rested on a nose that looked like a strawberry, red with spotted with pores. Professor Murphy took one look around, shook his head and sighed heavily. "I see our esteemed Dr. Critchlore has offered junior henchman positions to too many kids yet again." He sighed again. "I told him I could take 5 students in the program. We have," he began counting, 27. "Ove." Nervous whispering spread through the room. I'm sure we all wanted the same thing. Were we going to be kicked out of the junior henchman training program? Would we have to go back to regular minion training? "Why don't we fight it out for the 5 spots, Rufus said. He looked at me and sneered. "I call Higgins." After the laughter died down, someone pointed out the window. I turned my head and saw that the first-year zombies were crashing through the bushes, heading right for my window. They were moaning, "Higgins, Higgins brains, Higgins brains." "What is going on out there?" Professor Murphy said. "They want Higgins's brains, sir," Rufus said. "They must be dieting." More laughter. I chuckled at that one myself, I had to admit. It was pretty funny. "Higgins brains, Higgins brains. Higgins, dog's body Higgins is in this class," Professor Murphy said, looking around. Kids snickered at my old nickname, but I ignored it and raised my hand so that Professor Murphy could see me. "Yes, sir," I said. "I'm sorry, sir. I was assigned to Coach Foley this morning, but he left. I did my best with them, sir." "Did you feed them?" he asked. "Yes," I answered. "It was the only way to get them to take the potion. So they're potion controlled," he said, raising his eyebrows and nodding like he was impressed. "Very well. Just order them to report to the necromancer." I opened the window. The zombies seemed excited to see me. They moved a fraction faster as they crashed their bodies into the wall. They moaned a bit faster too. Higgins brains! Higgins brains! Report to the necromancer, I said in my most commanding voice. Higgins brains! Higgins brains! They kept saying. Please report to the necromancer, I said, a little quieter. Please. Higgins brains! Higgins brains! I heard some giggles, a few comments like, not really henchman material, floated through the air in my direction. My skin felt hot. I think my lower lip might have trembled. I really, really wanted the zombies to obey. I practically whispered, You have to go to the necromancer. It came out squeaky, which almost made me cry from embarrassment. They stopped moaning, turned around and left. I nearly collapsed with relief. But then I wondered, why did it take so long for them to obey a command? All right then, Professor Murphy said, if nobody else's first-year minions have followed them to class, we can get to business. I went back to my seat, but someone had taken it, so I stood by the window. As I said, I have only 5 positions available, Professor Murphy continued. Dr. Critchlore is apparently somewhat distracted at the moment. I'm sorry for the lot of you who will have to return to the regular minion program, but that's the way it is. This happened last year when I had 7 candidates for the 5 openings. We decided who'd stay based on a series of tests. I don't know if I can do that with 27 students. Part of me wants to throw the lot of you out and skip the program this year altogether, but I know that wouldn't be fair. So if any of you would like to volunteer to exit the program now, I'd appreciate it. Any volunteers? Nobody raised a hand. I thought I should probably bow out. There was no way I was as good as any of these guys. I looked at them and they all seemed to scream, Junior henchman. Smart, resourceful, strong. If I were an evil overlord, I'd take any one of them over me. I sighed. I felt my arm inch up, but something held it down. I looked over and saw Janet Desmarais, another 3rd year. Her gaze was on the teacher, but her hand was wrapped around my wrist in a grip so tight I couldn't move my arm. Don't you dare raise the other one, she whispered. As if I could. I was too shocked. Janet Desmarais was holding my hand. My chest felt squeezed and floaty at the same time. She kept her gaze forward, but I couldn't take my eyes off her. Those playful brown eyes, the way a smile danced on her lips. She tucked her hair behind her ears and glanced at me, and I had to look away. Despite my shock, I felt someone's stare on me, probably because of my enhanced werewolf senses. In the back of the room, Rufus sat scowling at me. His gaze travelled down to my hand clutched in Janet's grip, then back up to my face. If those eyes could have shot flaming balls of fire, I'd have been nothing but a pile of smoking ashes. I looked back at Professor Murphy and tried not to think about Janet holding my hand. Janet Desmarais is holding my hand. I felt like howling. I'd had a few classes with Janet in the past, but I'd never talked to her, not once. She hung around with the other girls, most of them part sirens like her, able to lure men to their death with their beautiful singing. Their world seemed off limits and mysterious, like the forbidden quarry. Right then, Professor Murphy continued, until I can figure out how to pick 5, whether it's a random draw or a contest of some sort, you'll all have to take today's lesson. You've all been assigned to Professor Mentor, yes? We all nodded. Good. Their evaluation of your performance will have an impact on my choice too. After class, I chased after Janet, hypnotised by how perfect her dark hair was. It fell past her shoulders in a shiny wave that shimmered in the sun. She'd taken off her jacket and her arms were smooth and brown like a perfect mud puddle. Hey, I said, why'd you do that? I didn't want you to quit, obviously, she answered. But why? Runt, you always give up. Remember last year at field day? Right before your race, Rufus asked you to go to the other side of the track and tell his mum to watch him, and you went. You missed your own race to do that self-absorbed lump a favour. I remembered. I had a hard time saying no when people asked me to do stuff. I thought you liked Rufus. Well, he's a good-looking self-absorbed lump, those dimples, those blue eyes, she sighed. But I want you to stay in Professor Murphy's class and do your best. Okay, I said. I hadn't been paying attention to my surroundings as we walked, but when I looked up I saw that Janet had made it to her territory and I was still standing next to her. 5 girls glared at me with raised eyebrows, or, in the case of Frida, eyebrow. She's an ogre. I yelped and ran off, their laughter chasing me.